My name is Lillie, and I'm 57 years old. Just an hour ago, I was standing in what I thought was my own living room when my daughter Amanda looked me straight in the eye and said something that made my blood run cold. She told me that if I wanted to stay in this house, I'd have to work for free as her unpaid helper and full-time caretaker for my grandchildren. As I looked around at the walls I had paid for the furniture I had chosen, I realized something had gone terribly wrong. How did I end up being threatened with eviction from my own home by the daughter I had sacrificed everything for after my husband died? Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Have you ever felt like your own family was taking advantage of your kindness? Let me know in the comments and let's get into what happened when my generosity was mistaken for weakness. Looking back now, I can see how different my life was just 5 years ago. My husband Robert and I had been married for 25 wonderful years. He was the kind of man who remembered to bring me coffee in bed every Sunday morning and never forgot our anniversary. We had built a beautiful life together in our three-bedroom house on Maple Street, complete with a garden that Robert tended to like it was his most precious child. Amanda was our pride and joy. From the moment she took her first steps in our living room to the day she graduated summa cum laude from college, we supported her every dream. Robert would drive 2 hours just to watch her debate team competitions, and I spent countless weekends helping her with school projects. We weren't wealthy, but we made sure Amanda never wanted for anything that mattered. When Robert suffered his sudden stroke at 59, our world shattered. It happened on a Tuesday morning while he was drinking his coffee and reading the newspaper. One moment he was laughing at the comics section, the next moment he was unconscious on our kitchen floor. Despite the doctor's best efforts, he never regained consciousness. 3 days later, I was planning his funeral instead of our upcoming vacation to Yellowstone. Amanda was 27, then working on her doctoral dissertation in psychology. She flew home immediately and stayed with me for 2 weeks after the funeral. During those dark days, she held me while I cried and helped me sort through Robert's belongings. She kept saying she was worried about me living alone in such a big house, especially with my limited income from social work. That's when I made what I thought was a smart decision. I sold our family home and used the proceeds to buy a smaller, more manageable house just 10 minutes from Amanda's apartment. The sale gave me enough money to pay off my mortgage completely and still have a substantial nest egg left over. More importantly, it allowed me to help Amanda finish her education without the burden of student loans crushing her future. For the first few months after Robert's death, Amanda visited me almost every weekend. We'd cook together, watch old movies, and talk about her research. She was studying family dynamics, which felt ironic now that I think about it. During one of those visits, she met Derek at a coffee shop near my house. He seemed charming enough, tall, with an easy smile and a sales job that allowed him to dress nicely. Amanda was smitten from their first date. I was genuinely happy when Amanda announced her engagement 6 months later. After everything we'd been through, seeing her face light up when she talked about Derek brought me such joy. When she told me she was pregnant with twins just a year into their marriage, I cried happy tears for the first time since Robert's death. I was going to be a grandmother, and my daughter would have the family she'd always wanted. During Amanda's pregnancy, we talked constantly about the future. She'd call me every evening to tell me about her day, her morning sickness, her excitement about preparing the nursery. She often said things like, "Mom, I don't know what I'll do without you when the babies come. I'm going to need you so much." Those words filled the empty space in my heart that Robert's death had left behind. Tyler and Emma were born on a crisp October morning, two perfect 6-pound bundles who immediately became the center of my universe. I was in the delivery room when they took their first breaths, and I swear they both looked right at me as if they already knew who their devoted grandmother would be. Amanda had a difficult delivery and needed several weeks to recover, so I practically moved into their small apartment to help with the babies. Derek seemed appreciative at first. He'd thank me for doing the night feedings and keeping the house clean while Amanda rested. But after about a month, I started noticing subtle changes in his behavior. He'd make comments like, "Lillie, Amanda can handle things herself now, right?" Or, "I think we need some family time, just the four of us." When I'd suggest ways to help with the twins' sleeping schedule or feeding routine, he'd give me these looks that made me feel like I was overstepping some invisible boundary. Amanda herself seemed different too. The woman who used to call me every day now seemed distant and distracted. When I'd ask her about it, she'd just say she was adjusting to motherhood and felt overwhelmed. I understood that completely, but something in her tone made me wonder if there was more to it. She'd avoid eye contact when Derek made his little comments about my presence, and she stopped asking for my advice about the babies. The first real red flag came when the twins were about 6 months old. Amanda called me on a Wednesday evening and asked if I could watch Tyler and Emma for the weekend because she and Derek had something important to take care of. I was delighted to have my grandchildren for an extended stay and immediately started planning activities and preparing their favorite foods. But when I called Amanda on Sunday to ask what time they'd be picking up the babies, she didn't answer. I tried Derek's phone with the same result. Finally, on Monday morning, I decided to drive to their apartment to see what was happening. The neighbor told me she'd seen them loading suitcases into their car on Thursday night. When they finally returned on Tuesday, I discovered they'd taken a long weekend trip to Napa Valley without even telling me they were going out of town. When I confronted Amanda about leaving town without mentioning it, she became defensive. Mom, Derek, and I desperately needed some couple time. We haven't been alone together since the babies were born. I figured you'd understand since you're always talking about how important it is for us to take care of our relationship. Her response left me speechless. I wasn't upset about watching the twins, I was hurt that she'd lied to me about where she was going. Derek's attitude toward me grew increasingly cold after that incident. When I'd arrive for my regular Wednesday visits, he'd barely acknowledge my presence. If I offered suggestions about anything from the baby's routines to household organization, he'd respond with phrases like, "Thanks, but we've got it handled," or "I think we need to figure out our own way of doing things." Amanda would just sit there silently, occasionally nodding along with whatever Derek said. The final straw during this period came when Amanda called asking to borrow $5,000 to pay off some credit card debt. She explained that Derek's sales commissions had been lower than expected and they'd gotten behind on their payments. She promised to pay me back within 6 months. I transferred the money the same day, grateful that I was in a position to help my daughter during a difficult time. She never brought up repayment, and when I gently mentioned it months later, she acted like she'd forgotten about the entire transaction. Everything changed dramatically when Derek lost his job in the spring. His company had been downsizing, and despite his assurances that his position was secure, he was laid off with just 2 weeks' severance pay. Suddenly, the financial pressure on their young family became intense. They could barely afford rent, much less childcare, and Derek's job search wasn't going well in a competitive market. That's when Amanda started asking me to watch Tyler and Emma more frequently. What began as occasional babysitting quickly turned into several days per week, then every weekday, then entire weekends. She'd drop them off at 7 in the morning and sometimes not return until after 8 at night. When I asked what she was doing during those long hours, she'd give vague answers about job interviews, networking events, or helping Derek with his job search. Taking care of twin toddlers was exhausting work for someone my age. Tyler and Emma were at that stage where they needed constant supervision and entertainment. They'd wake up early, nap poorly, and required individual attention that left me drained by the end of each day. I found myself buying groceries, specifically for them, rearranging my furniture to make my house more child-friendly, and giving up all my personal activities to accommodate their schedule. I had to quit my part-time position at the community center because I simply couldn't manage both responsibilities. Amanda seemed relieved when I told her, saying it would make things so much easier for everyone. I didn't mind the sacrifice initially because I thought it was temporary, just until Derek found new employment and they could afford proper childcare again. But Derek's job search stretched on for months, and their demands on my time only increased. Amanda started asking me to prepare meals for the entire family, not just the children. She'd arrive at my house with a grocery list and expect me to have dinner ready when Derek came to pick everyone up. If I suggested they stay for dinner so we could all eat together, Derek would decline, saying they needed to get home for the children's bedtime routine. The breaking point came when I got sick with a terrible flu that left me bedridden for 3 days. Instead of understanding that I needed rest, Amanda reacted with anger when I called to say I couldn't take the twins. She accused me of being unreliable and said she didn't know what they were going to do about childcare. When I suggested she stay home with her own children for a few days, she responded, "Mom, you know I can't do that. We're counting on you to be responsible here." Derek made his feelings even more clear during a family barbecue at my house. In front of several of their friends, he made jokes about how I was always complaining about being tired and acting like watching my own grandchildren was such a burden. He told everyone that I was lucky to have such an important role in the family and that most grandmothers would be grateful for the opportunity to spend so much time with their grandchildren. The humiliation of being talked about that way in my own backyard at a party I was hosting and had paid for was devastating. My house had gradually transformed into a full-time daycare center. Toys covered every surface, children's books replaced my novels on the coffee table, and I'd installed safety gates throughout the house. My friends from book club stopped inviting me to events because I always had to decline due to babysitting responsibilities. My quiet, organized home had become chaos, and my peaceful retirement had turned into unpaid full-time work that never ended. When Derek finally found a new job, I thought our lives would return to some semblance of normalcy. He'd been hired as a regional sales manager for a medical supply company, which sounded impressive until I learned the salary was significantly lower than his previous position. Amanda explained that they'd need to make some major lifestyle changes to adjust to their reduced income. That's when they proposed the idea that would change everything. During what Amanda called a family meeting in my living room, she and Derek presented their solution to their financial problems. They wanted to sell my house and buy a larger home where we could all live together. They painted it as a wonderful opportunity for me to be even more involved in my grandchildren's lives while helping the family save money on housing costs. I was hesitant at first. I loved my little house and the independence it represented. But Amanda kept emphasizing how much the twins would benefit from having their grandmother right there with them all the time. Derek talked about how much sense it made financially and how we could all contribute to a better life for the children. After weeks of gentle pressure and repeated assurances that I would maintain my own space and independence within the shared household, I reluctantly agreed. The house hunting process should have been my first warning sign. Derek insisted on handling all the paperwork and negotiations, claiming his sales experience made him the obvious choice to deal with realtors and mortgage brokers. When I asked to see the contracts before signing, he assured me it was all standard paperwork and that he'd already reviewed everything carefully. Amanda supported him completely, saying she trusted Derek to handle the business aspects of the purchase. I signed the papers selling my house without fully understanding what I was agreeing to regarding the new home purchase. Derek had somehow structured the deal so that the new house would be titled in his name, only with some complicated explanation about credit scores and mortgage rates that I didn't fully comprehend. When I expressed concern about this arrangement, Amanda promised me it was just a technicality and that I would always be a full owner of our family home. Moving day was bittersweet. As I watched strangers load my furniture into trucks, I felt like I was closing a chapter of my life that I wasn't ready to finish. The new house was larger and nicer than anything I'd ever lived in, which should have made me happy. But when Derek showed me to my new room in the finished basement, my heart sank. It was clean and furnished, but it felt more like a guest room than a permanent living space. Derek immediately began establishing house rules that applied to everyone. We would eat dinner together every night at 6 o'clock sharp. Television viewing would be limited to family-friendly programming until after the children's 8 o'clock bedtime. Kitchen use was restricted during certain hours to avoid conflicts over space and appliances. Guests needed to be approved in advance and couldn't stay past 10 o'clock on weeknights. While these rules were presented as household guidelines that everyone would follow, it quickly became clear that they applied primarily to me. Derek and Amanda could eat whenever they wanted, watch whatever they chose, and invite whomever they pleased. When I questioned this double standard, Derek reminded me that it was his house and his responsibility to maintain order for the sake of his family. Amanda went along with everything Derek decided, often acting as his spokesperson when delivering new rules or restrictions. When I tried to talk to her privately about feeling restricted in what was supposed to be my home too, she'd get frustrated and say I was being dramatic. She kept insisting that we were all making sacrifices for the good of the family and that I needed to be more flexible about sharing space with others. The situation deteriorated rapidly once we'd all been living together for a few months. Derek had become increasingly controlling about every aspect of household life, treating me more like a live-in servant than a family member. The twins, now almost 3 years old, had also become my full-time responsibility again, while Amanda worked part-time as a research assistant and Derek traveled frequently for his new job. My daily routine had become exhausting and completely centered around everyone else's needs. I'd wake up at 6 to prepare breakfast for the family, get Tyler and Emma dressed and ready for their day, and then spend the next 10 hours managing their meals, activities, and needs. By the time Derek and Amanda returned home in the evenings, I was responsible for having dinner prepared and the house clean. When I tried to explain that caring for 2 active toddlers all day was becoming too physically demanding for someone my age, Derek's response was swift and harsh. He reminded me that I was living in his house rent-free and eating food that he paid for. He pointed out that most people my age would be grateful to have family willing to support them financially rather than complaining about helping out around the house. Amanda's silence during these conversations was almost worse than Derek's hostility. The daughter who had once valued my opinions and sought my advice now sat quietly, while her husband spoke to me like I was an ungrateful burden. When I'd look to her for support or understanding, she'd avoid eye contact or find reasons to leave the room entirely. The breaking point came on a particularly difficult day when both Tyler and Emma had been fighting a stomach virus. They'd been cranky and sick for 3 days, requiring constant attention and frequent clothing changes. I'd been up most of the previous night cleaning up after them and trying to keep them comfortable. By morning, I was exhausted and emotionally drained. When Derek came downstairs that morning, he immediately began complaining about the noise the children had made during the night. He said their crying had kept him awake and he needed his rest because of an important client presentation that day. Instead of asking how the children were feeling or offering to help, he handed me a list of tasks that needed to be completed before he returned that evening. The list included preparing food for Tyler and Emma's upcoming birthday party, deep cleaning the kitchen and living room, doing 3 loads of laundry, and grocery shopping for the week. When I stared at the paper in disbelief, Derek reminded me that this was what families do for each other and that I needed to pull my weight around the house. That's when I made my mistake. I told Derek that I needed to rest that day because I'd been up all night with sick children, and I asked if he could handle the party preparations himself or postpone the cleaning until the weekend. I suggested that Amanda could pick up groceries on her way home from work since she'd be driving right past the supermarket anyway. Derek's reaction was explosive. He accused me of being lazy and selfish, questioning whether I understood how much he was doing to support our family financially. He said that most grandmothers would be honored to help care for their grandchildren rather than constantly looking for ways to avoid responsibility. When Amanda appeared in the kitchen during this confrontation, I waited for her to defend me or at least acknowledge that I'd been working hard to care for her sick children. Instead, Amanda sided completely with her husband. What happened next will be burned into my memory forever. Instead of supporting her own mother, Amanda looked me directly in the eye and said the words that shattered whatever relationship we had left. She told me that if I wanted to continue living in their house, I needed to understand my role and fulfill my responsibilities without complaining. Derek stepped closer and outlined exactly what those responsibilities would include. I was expected to provide full-time childcare for Tyler and Emma 7 days a week. I would be responsible for all meal preparation, including breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the entire family. Housekeeping duties would include laundry, cleaning, and maintaining all common areas of the house. All of this work would be performed without any form of compensation because my room and board were considered payment enough. When I started to protest, Amanda cut me off with a coldness I'd never heard from her before. She said I was getting older and that I should be grateful to have family willing to take care of me in my declining years. She pointed out that nursing homes were expensive and that this arrangement was beneficial for everyone involved. The implication was clear: accept their terms or find myself without a place to live. Derek added his own threats to Amanda's ultimatum. He reminded me that the house was legally his property and that he could ask me to leave at any time. He said that if I chose to be difficult about this arrangement, I would not only lose my home, but also lose access to my grandchildren. Amanda nodded along with everything he said, confirming that she would support whatever decision Derek made about my living situation. The moment that broke my heart completely was when Amanda said, "Mom, you have to understand that this isn't just about you anymore. Derek and I have to think about what's best for our family, and that means everyone needs to contribute according to their abilities. Your ability is to help with the children and the house." As I stood there in the kitchen I had cleaned countless times, surrounded by the toys I had organized and the breakfast dishes I had washed, I realized exactly what had happened to me. I had been manipulated into giving up my financial independence, my home, and my autonomy. The money from my house sale, which should have secured my retirement, had been used to purchase a home that I had no legal claim to whatsoever. Looking around at the walls I had indirectly paid for and the furniture I had helped choose, I understood that I was no longer a beloved family member. I had become unpaid household staff with no rights, no respect, and no way out unless I was willing to lose my grandchildren forever. Derek and Amanda were using my love for Tyler and Emma as a weapon to keep me trapped in an impossible situation. But in that moment of absolute clarity, as I stared at my daughter's face and saw a stranger looking back at me, I realized something important. I still had choices. I still had strength. And I absolutely was not going to spend the remaining years of my life being treated like an indentured servant by my own child. After that confrontation, I didn't argue or plead or make demands. Instead, I told Amanda and Derek that I needed some time to think about what they'd said, and I went downstairs to my basement room. For the first time in months, I locked my door and sat quietly in the space that had never really felt like home. That night, while Derek and Amanda handled their own children's bedtime routine for once, I began making phone calls. My first call was to James Mitchell, the attorney who had handled Robert's estate and my house sale. I explained the situation without emotion or drama, focusing on the legal and financial aspects of what had happened. James immediately expressed concern about the way the house purchase had been structured and agreed to review all my paperwork the following day. Next, I called my old friend Sarah, who I'd lost touch with since moving in with Amanda and Derek. Sarah had been widowed around the same time as me, and she'd successfully rebuilt her life as an independent woman in her 60s. When I explained what had been happening, she was horrified but not entirely surprised. She'd noticed how isolated I'd become and had wondered if everything was really as wonderful as I'd claimed during our brief conversations. James discovered what I had suspected but hadn't wanted to admit. Derek had structured the home purchase in a way that gave me no legal ownership, despite using my money for the down payment and closing costs. However, he'd made several mistakes in the paperwork that might allow me to recover at least a portion of my investment. More importantly, James explained that I had been the victim of elder financial abuse, which carried serious legal consequences. Sarah helped me research my options for housing and financial independence. She introduced me to a support group for women who had experienced family financial abuse, and I was shocked to learn how common my situation was. Many of the women shared stories remarkably similar to mine: adult children who had manipulated their way into controlling their parents' assets while providing minimal care or respect in return. Over the following weeks, I quietly began documenting everything that had happened. I kept records of the hours I worked caring for the children, the household tasks I performed, and the way Derek and Amanda spoke to me. I saved text messages and emails that demonstrated their expectations and demands. Most importantly, I hired a private investigator to look into Derek and Amanda's finances. What the investigator discovered was stunning. Derek had gambling debts that he'd hidden from Amanda totaling over $40,000. He'd been using my house sale money not just for their home down payment, but to pay off bookies and credit card companies. Amanda knew about the gambling, but had convinced herself that Derek's new job would solve their financial problems. They'd both convinced themselves that exploiting me was justified because they were in such desperate straits. Armed with this information and James's legal advice, I began preparing my exit strategy. I found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in a senior living community about 30 minutes away from Amanda's house. It was close enough that I could maintain a relationship with my grandchildren under proper circumstances, but far enough away that I could establish my independence. The apartment complex offered exactly what I needed: a community of people my age, scheduled activities and social opportunities, and most importantly, my own space that no one could take away from me. I put down a deposit and arranged to move in at the end of the month, all without Derek and Amanda suspecting anything was wrong. My plan was to confront them at Tyler and Emma's third birthday party, which they were hosting at the house the following weekend. All of their friends and extended family would be there, including people who knew me and remembered when I had my own home and independence. I wanted witnesses to what I was about to say. The birthday party was a beautiful event that I had spent the previous week preparing for, just as Derek had demanded. I'd decorated the house, prepared food for 30 guests, and made sure Tyler and Emma looked perfect in their matching outfits. As friends and family filled the house I had helped purchase, I moved through the crowd serving food and cleaning up messes, like the hired help I had apparently become. Midway through the party, after Tyler and Emma had opened their presents and everyone was relaxing in the backyard, I asked for everyone's attention. Amanda and Derek looked surprised, but pleased, probably expecting me to make some kind of grandmother speech about how proud I was of the children. Instead, I calmly announced that I would be moving out of their house the following week. I explained that I had found my own apartment and would be resuming my independent life as a woman in her 50s who deserved respect and autonomy. The shocked silence that followed was broken by several guests asking questions about why I was leaving such a lovely home and seemingly perfect family situation. That's when I shared the truth. I told everyone present that Derek and Amanda had been using my house sale money while treating me as unpaid domestic help. I explained that they'd threatened to cut off my access to my grandchildren unless I agreed to work for them without compensation or personal freedom. I described the financial manipulation and emotional abuse that had characterized our living arrangement. Derek tried to interrupt and control the narrative, but I continued speaking calmly and clearly. I mentioned the gambling debts, the hidden financial problems, and the legal issues surrounding the house purchase. By the time I finished speaking, several family members were staring at Amanda and Derek in shock and disgust. Amanda's face had gone completely white. She tried to pull me aside for a private conversation, but I declined. I told her that we could discuss our future relationship through my attorney and that any visitation with Tyler and Emma would need to be arranged through proper legal channels that protected everyone's rights and interests. Derek became aggressive and started shouting about how ungrateful I was and how I was ruining the children's birthday party. That's when Uncle Robert, my late husband's brother, stepped forward and told Derek that he was out of line. Several other family members supported Uncle Robert, making it clear that they were appalled by what they'd heard. As I left the party that day, Tyler and Emma ran after me, asking why Grandma was leaving. I knelt down and promised them that I would always love them and that we would still spend time together, just in different ways. I gave them each a special gift I'd been saving and told them to remember that their grandmother would always be there for them when they needed me. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. James was able to recover 60% of my original house sale money, plus damages for the financial abuse I'd suffered. Derek and Amanda were forced to sell the house to pay the settlement, which left them in a much smaller rental property with significant debt remaining. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my sunny living room in my new apartment watching the autumn leaves change color outside my window. The view is beautiful, and more importantly, it belongs to me. No one can take it away, no one can make demands about how I spend my time here, and no one treats me like anything other than the independent woman I've always been. My new life has exceeded every expectation I had when I first toured this apartment. The community here is vibrant and welcoming, full of people who have rich histories and interesting stories to share. I've joined the book club, started taking watercolor painting classes, and even volunteered to help with the community garden. For the first time in years, I feel intellectually stimulated and socially connected. I found a wonderful part-time position at the public library helping with their literacy programs and senior outreach services. Working with people who appreciate my experience and treat me with professional respect has reminded me of my value beyond my role as a grandmother and domestic helper. My colleagues have become friends, and my supervisor has already mentioned possibilities for expanding my responsibilities if I'm interested. The relationship with Tyler and Emma has actually improved now that it's properly structured. We have scheduled visits every other weekend, and I take them on adventures that are fun for all of us. Without the stress of full-time caregiving and household management, I can focus on being the loving grandmother I always wanted to be. We go to museums, have picnics in the park, and read stories together without any of the tension that characterized our previous interactions. Amanda and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship, though it will never be the same as it was before. She's been attending counseling to understand how she allowed Derek to manipulate not just me, but her as well. She's acknowledged that she made terrible choices and that she prioritized her marriage over her mother's well-being in ways that were inexcusable. Our conversations are careful and somewhat formal, but they're honest in ways they hadn't been for years. Derek, meanwhile, has shown no remorse or understanding of what he did wrong. According to Amanda, he still believes he was justified in his treatment of me and blames me for their current financial difficulties. Amanda has started couples counseling with him, but she's also consulting with a divorce attorney. She's beginning to understand that Derek's willingness to exploit and abuse her mother reveals something fundamental about his character that goes far beyond financial stress. The most important thing I've learned through this experience is that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. For years, I thought that being a good mother and grandmother meant saying yes to every request and sacrificing my own needs for my family's benefit. I believed that setting limits or expecting respect was selfish and ungrateful, but I understand now that healthy relationships require mutual respect and consideration. When I allowed Amanda and Derek to take advantage of my generosity without any boundaries, I wasn't helping anyone. I was enabling them to become people who could justify exploiting someone they claimed to love. My refusal to accept their treatment wasn't just necessary for my own well-being, it was the loving thing to do for them as well. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Sometimes protecting your own dignity and independence is the greatest gift you can give to people who have lost sight of how to treat others with respect. Sometimes walking away is the only way to preserve the possibility of a real relationship in the future. I don't harbor anger toward Amanda and Derek anymore. I feel sadness for the pain our family has experienced, and the trust that was broken, but I don't carry bitterness about what happened. Forgiveness doesn't mean accepting poor treatment or forgetting important lessons. It means releasing the poison of resentment while maintaining the wisdom that comes from difficult experiences. As I sit here in my own beautiful space, surrounded by my own chosen belongings, and planning my own schedule for tomorrow, I feel something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace with my choices. I know that I did everything I could to support my family, and I also know that I found the strength to save myself when that support became exploitation. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family took advantage of your kindness? How did you find the strength to set boundaries with people you love? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like this video if my story resonated with you, and subscribe for more real-life experiences about family relationships and finding your strength when life gets complicated. Don't forget to share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your independence and self-respect. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve to be treated with dignity no matter who is asking you to accept less. May you always have the courage to choose your own well-being when others won't choose it for you.